After 24 hours without sleep, your reaction time is statistically equivalent to driving drunk. After 48 hours, your immune system collapses. After 72 hours, you start to hallucinate. At each of those thresholds, a different system fails, and they fail in a predictable order. At 24 hours, the prefrontal cortex. At 48 hours, the immune system and hormonal regulation. At 72 hours, reality testing itself. This is what breaks, and when, and why. Sleep is not rest. Sleep is maintenance. Two of the body's most expensive cleanup operations cannot run while the brain is awake, and both of them fail loudly when you skip a night. The first is the glymphatic system. Your brain has a janitor that only works while you sleep. During slow-wave sleep, the spaces between brain cells expand by roughly 60%, and cerebrospinal fluid flushes through the tissue, washing out metabolic waste, including beta amyloid, the protein that accumulates in Alzheimer's disease. Skip a night, and the trash stays in the cellar. The second is memory consolidation. The day's events are written into long-term storage during specific sleep stages, mostly in the hippocampus. Without that pass, recent memories degrade and new learning becomes inefficient. That is why the brain shuts itself off every night. What follows is what happens when it cannot. Phase 1, 24 hours. The first system to break is the prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain that filters bad ideas before they become bad decisions. It governs working memory, judgment, impulse control, and reaction time. It is also the most metabolically expensive region of the brain, and metabolically expensive systems are the first to suffer when fuel runs short. After 24 hours awake, your reaction time and cognitive performance are statistically equivalent to a blood alcohol concentration of 0.10%. That is over the legal driving limit in essentially every jurisdiction on Earth. A study by Williamson and Feyer, published in 2000 in Occupational and Environmental Medicine, ran sleep-deprived subjects through psychomotor tests against subjects given alcohol. After 17 hours awake, performance matched a blood alcohol of 0.05. After 24, it matched 0.10. The driver who pulled an all-nighter is not metaphorically drunk. They are drunk by every measurable behavioral standard. The mechanism is direct. A 2000 study by Thomas and colleagues in the Journal of Sleep Research used PET imaging to track glucose uptake in sleep-deprived brains. The prefrontal cortex showed a roughly 14% drop in metabolic activity. The fuel is gone, and the part of the brain that runs the fuel-hungry computations runs first into the wall. When the prefrontal cortex weakens, its connection to the amygdala, the brain's threat detection center, also weakens. A 2007 study by Yu and colleagues in Current Biology scanned sleep-deprived subjects and found amygdala reactivity to negative stimuli increased by 60%, with the regulatory link to the prefrontal cortex effectively severed. Without that break, emotional responses become disproportionate. Minor stresses trigger major reactions. Risk assessment collapses. You can see this in the data on hospital staff. A 2004 study by Landrigan and colleagues in the New England Journal of Medicine compared medical interns working traditional 24-hour shifts against interns on shorter rotations. The 24-hour group made roughly 36% more serious medical errors and over 5 times as many serious diagnostic errors. A follow-up by Barger and colleagues in 2006 in PLOS Medicine found that in months when interns worked 5 or more extended duration shifts, they were nearly 9 times more likely to make a fatigue-related medical error that led to a patient fatality. The cost of one sleepless shift is paid, sometimes, in someone else's life. Phase 2, 48 hours. By the second day, the failure spreads from the brain into the body. The immune system goes down first. Natural killer cells are the immune system's frontline assassins. They patrol the body looking for cells that have been infected by viruses or have turned cancerous, and they destroy them on contact. A 1996 study by Irwin and colleagues in the FARCEB journal measured natural killer cell activity in healthy men after a single night of sleep restricted to roughly 4 hours. Activity dropped by over 70%. One bad night, 70%. The cells are still there, they have stopped working. At the same time, the body starts producing inflammatory cytokines as if it were fighting an infection that does not exist. A 2004 study by Vgontzas and colleagues in the Journal of Clinical Endocrinology and Metabolism showed that sleep-deprived subjects had elevated levels of interleukin-6 and TNF-alpha, inflammatory signaling molecules, at concentrations comparable to those seen during mild viral illness. The body, denied sleep, behaves as though it is sick. After enough nights, it gets sick. Around this point, microsleeps begin. Your brain can shut off for 30 seconds while your eyes stay open. A microsleep is a brief, involuntary lapse of consciousness lasting from a fraction of a second to about 30 seconds. EEG recordings from sleep-deprived subjects in work led by Hans van Dongen at Washington State University show clear sleep stage signatures intruding into apparent wakefulness. The subject does not always notice. The body does not stop moving. The hands stay on the steering wheel. The eyes can remain open. But the brain is, briefly, asleep. This is why drowsy driving accidents tend to happen on long, straight, monotonous roads with no skid marks. There was no attempt to brake. The endocrine system is also coming apart. Cortisol, the stress hormone, climbs and stays elevated. Growth hormone, normally released in pulses during deep sleep, is suppressed. A 2011 study by Leproult and Van Cauter in the Journal of the American Medical Association tracked young, healthy men through a single week of restricted sleep at 5 hours per night. Their daytime testosterone levels dropped by between 10 and 15%, a hormonal shift equivalent to aging the subjects by roughly 10 to 15 years. Phase 3, 72 hours. By the third day, the failures are no longer subtle. The brain begins to lose its grip on reality. At 72 hours awake, your brain starts dreaming with your eyes open. A 2018 meta-analysis by Waters and colleagues in Frontiers in Psychiatry surveyed the perceptual disturbances reported across decades of sleep deprivation studies. The progression is consistent. First, simple visual distortions, flickering, geometric patterns, halos around lights, surfaces that appear to ripple. Then, after roughly 48 to 72 hours, complex hallucinations. People who are not in the room, voices, fully formed scenes. This is not psychosis. The likely mechanism is REM intrusion, fragments of dream state activity bleeding into waking consciousness, because the brain can no longer hold the boundary between the two. The dream architecture starts running while the lights are on. Working memory degrades steeply. A 2010 meta-analysis by Lim and Dinges in Psychological Bulletin pooled data from over 70 sleep deprivation studies and found that sustained attention and working memory tasks showed the largest, most consistent declines. After 2 nights of total deprivation, performance on simple vigilance tasks drops to levels seen in clinical attention disorders. The subject can be looking directly at a number on a screen and fail to register that it is there. Paranoid ideation rises in parallel. A 2007 study by Khan Green and colleagues in sleep medicine assessed psychiatric symptoms in healthy young adults after roughly 2 days of sleep deprivation. Subjects scored higher on measures of paranoia, persecutory thinking, and somatic complaint. They were not psychotic. They were intact people whose threat detection systems had stopped calibrating against reality. Background noise becomes meaningful. Strangers seem to be watching. In 1964, a high school student stayed awake for 11 days. Randy Gardner was 17 years old. The experiment ran in San Diego under the supervision of Stanford sleep researcher William Dement, partly to test the limits of voluntary wakefulness. By the 5th day, Gardner was hallucinating. By the 8th, his speech was slurred and his short-term memory was failing. By day 11, 264 hours, he could not perform simple subtraction. He set a Guinness record, slept 14 hours, and recovered without obvious long-term damage. The case became famous, and it should be cited carefully. The original methodology has been criticized. Gardner's wakefulness was not continuously instrumented, and brief microsleeps almost certainly went uncounted. The headline number stands. The footnotes are messier than the legend. Sleep debt is real, but the body does not pay it back in one transaction. Cognitive function recovers within days. The immune system can take weeks. A 2003 study by Belenki and colleagues in the Journal of Sleep Research tracked subjects across multiple cycles of restriction and recovery. After significant deprivation, a single 8-hour night is not enough. Multiple consecutive full nights are required, and even then, certain markers of attention, reaction time, and immune function show measurable lag for days, sometimes weeks afterward. The body's recovery clock and the brain's recovery clock are not synchronized. What recovers last is not always what recovers most visibly. Reaction time and basic alertness rebound first. Emotional regulation and certain immune markers can stay measurably impaired well past the point where the subject reports feeling back to normal. The body keeps separate ledgers. They do not all close at the same time. The most uncomfortable finding in the field comes from Dongen and colleagues, 2003, in the journal Sleep. Subjects restricted to 6 hours of sleep per night for 2 weeks showed cognitive impairment equivalent to 48 hours of total sleep deprivation. They did not feel impaired. They subjectively rated themselves as only slightly tired. The drift had become invisible to the system that was drifting. The brain's last lie, when it is failing, is that it is fine. By the time you trust your own assessment, the assessment itself has been compromised. Sleep is not optional. It is not a productivity variable. It is biological maintenance, scheduled by systems that predate language and conducted under non-negotiable terms. You can refuse to pay, you cannot refuse the bill. The prefrontal cortex will dim, the immune system will fold. The boundary between waking and dreaming will thin. Whether you intended any of it is irrelevant. The brain is patient. It collects what it is owed in the currency of its choosing on a schedule it does not share. The body's accounts close every night, whether or not you were paying attention, whether or not you were home.